In this video, I wanted to see if I could beat a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokemon Ultra Moon with only Kanto Pokemon. That's right, I'm doing my first ever Generation 7 Nuzlocke. Alola has a huge variety of Kanto Pokemon that can help me on this journey. They're all going to need to give it their all though, because under my hardcore Nuzlocke rules, if a Pokemon faints, it's considered dead and must be released. I can also only catch the first Kanto Pokemon per area. The rest of the rules are on screen now and in the description. With the rules out the way, let's jump right into the tropical paradise that is Alola and see if we've got what it takes to beat this ultra hard challenge. Oh, and remember to leave a like to wish me luck and subscribe for more in the future. Kukui's abs demand it. Right, so first things first, we've got to pick our starter, and shockingly, Rowlet, Litten and Popplio aren't Kanto Pokemon. That means after kicking Rowlet off a cliff, we can go find our real starter, a Caterpie I named Vikakid. Vikakid is immediately able to evolve into Butterfree, meaning we've got a fully evolved Pokemon as our starter. My Butterfly is clearly OP. I do immediately run into a problem, however. Basically, this game is really strange with how it treats the first couple of routes. Despite being made of multiple different parts, the trainer school and the outskirts are considered part of Route 1, meaning if I went by my normal rule set for encounters, I'd be really limited on what Pokemon I could catch. This doesn't sound very fun, so instead, for Routes 1 and 2, I'll be treating every different encounter table as a chance to get a new Pokemon. That means after visiting the professor's lab and witnessing whatever the hell that was, I hope Lube was involved, that poor Rockruff, I can start picking up my early game encounters. Firstly, I find a Slowpoke I name Slowguy. I rarely get to use Slowpokes, and they take forever to evolve, but Slowbro should be really strong, so I'm excited to find this as my first encounter. Second, I find a Pichu I name Massive Nerd. Now, you might be about to point out that Pichu is not a Kanto Pokemon, but I've decided that I'm allowed to catch Pokemon that evolve into Kanto Pokemon, I'm just not allowed to use them before they evolve. Luckily for me, I don't have to wait in this case, because I can immediately evolve Massive Nerd into a Pikachu. Next, I find an extremely important encounter in the trainer school, a Magnemite I name Shadow. Obviously, I can't evolve Shadow into a Magnezone, because then he'd stop being a Kanto Pokemon, but this doesn't stop my Zappy Magnet being one of the best encounters I can get in this game. Carrying on, after beating up a school teacher, because you know, the education system, I'm able to head into the nearby city where I find another important encounter, a Mime Junior I name Mimic. I'll have to wait a bit before I can use Mimic, as she won't evolve until I get a bit further along, but once she does evolve, she'll become a surprisingly strong support Pokemon. Next, for my Route 2 encounter, I find an Abra. Now, the chances of me catching this are really low, but maybe I'll get lucky. I honestly wasn't expecting to catch that. I'm sure I'll take full advantage of this bit of early game luck. Mantine the Abra was never seen again. Heading slightly east into the nearby cemetery, I start looking for the only ghost type I'm going to be able to get during this run, a Ghastly. Annoyingly though, instead I keep running into these stupid birds. What's worse is that Slowguy is too slow to escape. How's that for foreshadowing on the name? Oh well, not a problem, I'll just switch. Well, god damn it. Sucks to lose what could have been a really powerful Pokemon so early. Rest in peace, Slowguy. Can I also point out, this was clearly fate, because Slowguy died because he was too slow, and he died in a cemetery. What are the odds? Annoyingly, to rub salt in the wound, I then run into another 10 Murkrows before finally actually finding a Ghastly. You'd think with it taking so long to find this stupid ghost, Ghastly must have a really low spawn chance, right? Well, no, it's 30%. This game just hates me. Eventually though, I stop running into Murkrows, and finally find a Ghastly, who of course, chat decides to name Murkrow. Only one more encounter to grab before our first trial then, and I'm hoping to find a Growlithe with Intimidate here, because that could be really useful going forward, but instead I find a Spearow I name Pidgeytrust. Normal flying types are usually just kind of boring, but Pidgeytrust is actually pretty decent, so no complaints from me. That brings us to our first trial of the run then, and I've decided I'm not allowed to overlevel the totem Pokemon up until the trial actually starts. That means I'm actually able to gain a few levels before even getting to our first major boss battle. This overgrown rat is pretty scary, but I've got a fairly straightforward plan, so let's jump right in. I decide to start with Vikakid, who immediately lands a sleep powder. Of course, Raticate immediately calls in reinforcements. I debate spending an extra turn putting the second rat to sleep, but decide against it and instead switch into Massive Nerd, who takes a surprisingly strong tackle on the switch. I then start spamming Charms. Charms is really strong here because it lowers the rat's attacks by 2 stages. That means I'm able to get the totem Pokemon to minus Thor attack before it wakes up and lands a Scary Face. I'm now in a good position to start trying to KO. Only problem is, if I try and switch here, the Rattata Might go through a pursuit and KO Massive Nerd. Don't really have a way to play around this though, because if I leave my Pikachu in, he will 100% die anyway. So I switch into Vika Kid and get very lucky as the mini rat doesn't go through a pursuit. I'm then able to outspeed and put the fat rat back to sleep with another sleep powder. Perfect. My butterfly is then able to get off 2 strong gusts to bring the Raticate down to 50% before being brought low by the Rattata. Right, gonna have to switch again. Fingers crossed we don't take another pursuit. Okay, we did take a second pursuit there, but our butterfly got to live on 4 HP. I'll take that, especially because now I've got Shadow out who can easily tank anything either rat can dish out, meaning my Magnet can easily KO the totem Pokemon with 2 Thunder Shocks and then the remaining rat with 2 more Thunder Shocks. Easy. First trial completed. Did get decently lucky there with sleep turns, but that went as well as I could have asked for. Next up, we've got the rest of the first island to explore, and that means more encounters. Firstly, now that I've beaten the trial, I can now catch something inside Verdant Cavern. I'm not counting regional variants as Kanto Pokemon, so the only Pokemon I can find here is Zubat. Without being able to evolve into Crobat, Golbat is kind of underwhelming, but I'm sure Olive will still be useful. Next, I can grab an encounter I missed earlier. Some would say this is the most important encounter of the run, and I'm not disagreeing. One last encounter to grab then. Heading onto Route 3, I can find a Mankey I named Mobius. I don't get a lot of fighting types this run, so this angry monkey should prove to be really useful. That's all of my encounters then before our first grand trial. Just got to do some story stuff. And after chasing after Nebby, who clearly doesn't give a f about staying in the bag, a man wearing nothing but shorts offers to show me something amazing if I get on my knees. Now, I don't like to prejudge people, but like, what the fuck? Anyway, moving on from that, I'm able to get a couple of evolutions before our first grand trial. Now, I was slightly worried about this fight, but looking at this team, Ghastly is completely immune to basically Hala's entire team. That's gonna make this straightforward. So I start with Murkrow while Hala starts with Machop. The AI switches because it can't attack me, so I'm able to get a Hypnosis off into the Crabrawler, putting it to sleep. Wasn't sure if the AI was going to switch there or not, so staying in was slightly risky. Paid off though, because now I can switch into Mr. Mime. 3 confusions are enough to KO the crab, meaning I've won this fight because the Kahuna literally can't touch Murkrow. Funnily enough though, I don't even need this instant win because I don't even need to switch Mimic out as she's able to take out the rest of this grand trial with no issues. Easy. We've officially beaten the first island. As a reward, I'm able to gain access to my first ride Pokemon Tauros, and this lets me smash through rocks on the Overworld. This actually lets me grab one more Pokemon from Route 1 before I carry on, a Munchlax I named Fish. I'm immediately able to evolve Fish into Snorlax, meaning I now have one of the best Pokemon in the game pretty decently early. It's then time to head over to Alola's second island, just have to play a really long and frankly uninteresting minigame. Minigames have never been Game Freak's strong point, have they? Once we eventually make it to the second island, I actually only get one more notable encounter before the next trial, an Eevee I named Magnus. I'm actually not sure what to evolve this into yet, so I'm going to hold off on making that decision until later. I'm then able to evolve Pidgeytrust into Thero before we arrive at our second trial. Now this trial is actually really scary. The totem Pokemon here is ridiculously tanky and will hit really hard with double power Stab Bubble. He's also able to call in some fairly annoying support Pokemon, so if I'm not careful, this could turn into a nightmare quickly. I decide the best defense is a good offense, so I start with Pidgeytrust. Pidgeytrust is able to start the fight with a really strong Aerial Ace that brings the massive insect down to 50% before taking a stupidly hard bubble. Then the totem monster calls in Masquerain, who has Intimidate. That's super unlucky because without that Intimidate, I'd now be able to KO the totem right here. Because I can't though, I decide instead to immediately KO the Masquerain with an Aerial Ace before it can start being annoying. Pidgeytrust unfortunately then does have to take another bubble that brings him down into the red, as the totem bug calls down another friend. At least this time it's the less annoying Dupide. Time to bring out the big guns, so I switch into Fish, who eats 2 bubbles like it's nothing. Perfect. Fish then has to take an Aura Beam? Why Aura Beam and not another bubble? No clue, and it's not like it matters because Fish is able to hit back with a Z move that finishes off the totem with what has got to be one of the silliest attack animations I've ever seen. I love it. With the totem down, that means I've only got one small bug left to deal with, and it goes down to a single chip away. That could have gotten bad with a few unlucky crits, but we made it through with no real issues. Second trial down. Thanks to getting through our second trial, I've now unlocked the ability to surf. That means if I backtrack to the first island, I can pick up a few important water Pokemon. The first of these is Squidward the Tentacle, and honestly, Tentacles are really strong and I think a lot of people tend to sleep on them. A second Pokemon I can grab is something that is definitely not slept on, a Magikarp I named Dragoon. It goes without saying that Gyarados is one of the best Pokemon in this game, so he's a brilliant encounter. Heading all the way back to the second island then, and moving forward, I catch another amazing water type, a Staryu I named Squareu. This stupid starfish does take 8 years to find, but she'll be worth it, trust me. That just leaves me one more Pokemon to grab as we make our way to our next trial, a Cubone I named Toe. Now Cubone isn't super useful because I can't evolve him into a Marowak until the end game, but I actually don't have any other ground types, so who knows, maybe he'll turn out to be useful. That's all I get in terms of encounters for this leg of my journey, meaning it's time for our third trial, the Fire Totem. I start with Dragoon against the Marowak. Annoyingly, the totem goes for a Detect turn 1, meaning I'm not able to get off any damage before it calls down its ally, Salazzle. Dragoon then has to take a Torment and a weak Hex before landing a Bite that does decent damage. Annoyingly, Dragoon actually doesn't have any other attacking moves, meaning because of Torment, I can't actually attack again. Because of this, I decide to switch into Fish, who is immune to the poison gas the Toxic Lizard tries to get off. Totally did that on purpose because I knew Fish was immune, no luck involved at all. Fish is now baiting a Brick Break and a Flame Burst, so I'm perfectly safe to switch into Dragoon through another Intimidate. I then try and get off another Bite, but of course the Marowak goes through another Detect, meaning my attack fails as my Water Dragon is brought to 50% after taking a Venoshock. On the following turn, a second Venoshock and Hex bring my Dragoon really low, but Dragoon survives and lands another Bite that very nearly KOs the Fire Totem. Okay, risking a crit like that really wasn't needed, but I'm clearly never punished. With Gyarados so low, I am forced to switch however. Thankfully, Squidward only takes a resisted Venoshock as Marowak detects again, meaning he comes in on really good HP. I can now Water Z-move the Marowak to finish off the totem. Was that overkill? Yes. Do I regret it? No. That just leaves the Poison Lizard, who can't touch Squidward, so after 2 Water Pulses, we're able to get another KO and win our third trial. Took some unnecessary risks there, but it all worked out. Third trial is down, only going to get more difficult from here. We actually don't have much to do before our next trial, other than evolving Olive. We then run into an old friend from Unova. No idea why Colress is here. My headcanon has always been that he's hiding out on these tropical islands as a wanted criminal. Or maybe he just wanted a vacation, who knows. Before we know it then, we meet Mallow and we're ready for our next trial. Before I even get to the Monster Totem Pokemon though, I make a pretty major mistake. If you don't do the puzzle before the Totem Pokemon correctly, you actually have to fight a few wild Pokemon without the chance to heal before the boss. This wouldn't have been a massive problem if it wasn't for Comfey. Comfey is really annoying to KO and is able to do a decent amount of chip to my Pokemon and waste a lot of my PP. Right, that doesn't bode well. Fingers crossed I can still handle the totem. So I decide to start with Vikakid against the Lurantis. Simple plan, put the bug to sleep and then Intimidate switch. So yeah, completely overlooked that trying to use Sleep Powder on a grass type wouldn't work. My brain just doesn't work sometimes, I swear. Really not going well so far. Vikakid's been hit really hard. I've done no damage to this monster, and now it's called its friend Kecleon, who threatens with ancient power. Can still get through this though. Just gotta start Intimidate switching between Shadow and Dragoon. These Pokemon have great synergy as they both resist moves the other baits. This lets me get off a lot of Intimidates without too much risk. Do still have to worry about crits though, but luckily Shadow and Dragoon pull through. With the Totem Monster at -5 attack, I decide to switch into Squidward and go through a Hydro Vortex Z-move into the Kecleon. I'm hoping to maybe get rid of the Kecleon as it threatens Pidgeytrust, who is now my best option at taking down the Lurantis. Of course, because I haven't made enough mistakes so far, I overlook that the sun is up, meaning my Z-move does next to nothing, and then Squidward is very nearly KO'd by a Solar Blade and a hard Dizzy Punch. Right, this is going so well. Still in an okay position here as the Lurantis has such low attack now, but need to stop making mistakes. Next best option, I switch into Pidgeytrust. Thankfully my bird eats a Solar Blade and Dizzy Punch like it's nothing, and I also don't get confused. Pidgeytrust is then able to land an Aerial Ace that does around 50% to the totem before being hit by an Ancient Power that hits super hard and gets the Omni Boost. Okay, this Kecleon is now scary. With that boost, Pidgeytrust is at risk of being KO'd here, here by a second ancient power, but if I can take out the Lurantis at the cost of losing my bird, that's 100% worth it. Before I can KO though, the totem heals, meaning I'm only able to bring it back down to 50%. Okay, well looks like I'm sacrificing my bird for nothing here then, and Kecleon goes to the sunny day. My bird lives. I either just got very lucky, or the Kecleon is out of ancient powers. I actually think it might be out, so I don't switch and stay in and get off another aerial ace, which is able to keep the Lurantis at 50% as it keeps healing. Kecleon just goes for a Screech, pretty much confirming that it's out of ancient power PP. I'd be in real trouble if it wasn't, so this has worked out really well. Even with the defense drop from Screech, without ancient power, no one is really threatening Pidgey Trust here, so I stay in and stall out another Synthesis as the Kecleon hits a Dizzy Punch. I really don't want to risk a crit anymore though, so I switch into Olive, who takes a Screech as the Lurantis heals through a 4th time. Olive then takes a weak X-Scissor and Dizzy Punch before getting off a wing attack that hits the Lurantis hard. I'm expecting the Lurantis to use its final heal here, so I switch into Dragoon to get off one final Intimidate. I then switch back into Olive. Right, now I can finally actually KO the totem after what feels like 8 years. It just takes 3 more wing attacks from Olive and the totem finally goes down. Then all that's left to do is slowly KO the Kecleon with Dragoon and my Butterfly. That means we've beaten our 4th trial in what was an incredibly messy fight. We won, but I can't exactly say I'm proud of how that fight went. Oh well, a win's a win, so just gotta carry on and hope to play better in the future. If you're annoyed at all that I didn't get punished at all during that last fight, don't worry, the game's got your back, because it does decide to punish me for my very messy grass trial. How does it punish me, you may ask? Well, by not spawning a Pinsir who I have to look for 45 minutes. I would like to think that at the very least, if I spent so long trying to catch one Pokemon, Pinsir must be really useful, right? Well, no, not at all. That was a complete waste of time. At least we can move on to something more important, some evolutions. Evolving Square U and Mobius here is actually vital, because next we've got our second grand trial against Olivia. Luckily, because I've got some decent counters to her Pokemon, this fight is actually pretty easy. Square U is able to take out her Anorith, Lileep is completely walled and taken down by Fish, Lycanroc would be scary, but Mobius is able to outspeed and one-shot with an all-out pummeling. Quick and easy fight, nice break from the last totem. Not a lot happens between here and my next trial, but what does happen is slightly strange, to say the least. I mean, it starts off pretty normal. I evolve Shadow into the extremely useful Magneton, but then I have an encounter with a wormhole and an alien squid comes out. Maybe I'd understand more if I was paying attention to the story. You'd think that would be the strangest part of my day, but then I discover that the Alolan police force has been infiltrated by Dittos. That's actually slightly horrifying. Alola is weird, man. To distract myself from the existential horror of the police force being replaced by what we can only assume is a hostile hive mind bent on the destruction of our species, I'm able to find another Pokemon. This time I'm able to catch a Cleffa, who I name Prism. A tanky fairy type could be just what I need going forward, so this is a pretty important find. Then I decide to evolve Magnus into Flareon because I don't have any other fire types, and I think I'm really going to need one for this next trial. Speaking of which, it's time for our 5th trial, this time against Togedemaru. Togedemaru might be small, but thanks to his steel typing and spiky shield, he's actually a pain in the arse to take down. Luckily, he's another totem that focuses on physical attacks, so intimidating should work well. So I start the fight with Dragoon for a turn 1 intimidate. I then switch into Toe. Toe isn't ideal here, but I actually don't have any other ground types, so I'm kind of forced to use him. Thankfully, I only need him through his immunity to ground type attacks that Dragoon baits, so he's actually pretty useful, shockingly. Annoyingly, thanks to a Stealth Rock setup by Skarmory, I can't switch Dragoon in quite as much as I'd like, but I'm still able to bring the totem down to -5 before Dragoon is brought into crit range. I then switch into the recently evolved Shadow, who I've given the Eviolite. The Eviolite makes my Zappy Magnet stupidly tanky, and because I can't evolve Shadow again, it's a match made in heaven. I then switch into Mobius after stalling out a Spiky Shield. I now should be in a good position to get off a really strong Z move, unless the totem uses Bounce first. Forgot Tailwind was up, meaning my monkey misses his Z move. Okay, that's not ideal, just got to try and get off a normal attack now, and of course, the totem goes to the spiky shield. This thing is so annoying. At the very least, Tailwind ends on the next turn, meaning my monkey is able to outspeed and hit a cross chop for decent damage. Finally got an attack off, but now I need to switch into Shadow to take a bounce. With Shadow out, I spend a turn setting up a Reflect before switching into Magnus. Thanks to a combination of Stealth Rock Chip, Zing Zap doing more than I thought it would, and Steel Wing critting, Magnus actually takes a lot more than I'm expecting on the switch. I then get stupidly unlucky because I stall through a turn with Protect to bait out a spiky shield, and of course the totem doesn't go for it. Then on the following turn, I go through an actual attack, and guess what? Spiky shield. This is getting very annoying. Fuck you, Togedemaru. Thankfully, after taking another Zing Zap, Magnus is finally able to land a Fire Fang that very nearly KOs and gets the burn. The burn there is kind of huge because now I just have to stall through a couple of turns before the totem finally goes down. Shadow is then able to KO the Skarmory with charge beams. Okay, so that fight was very annoying, but we pushed through with another deathless trial win. Nothing exciting happens before my next totem fight, so we can skip straight to our next trial, this time against the spooky ghost totem. So after making our way through the haunted supermarket, which has got to be one of the coolest set pieces Game Freak has ever come up with, we come face to face with our next totem, Mimikyu. Like the majority of totem Pokemon so far, Mimikyu is once again a physical attacker, so you guessed it, we're Intimidate switching again. You might complain about me using the same strategy every fight, but honestly, because I'm only fighting one threatening Pokemon that will never switch, Intimidate is super broken and I'd be an idiot not to take advantage of it. This is honestly a pretty straightforward fight. I'm able to bring the Mimikyu down to -6 attack with Intimidates from Dragoon, and then bring the totem low with a combination of Squidward and Pidgeytrust before Magnus is able to take the KO with another Overkill Z move. Oh yeah, and there's a big stupid jellyfish, which is easily KO'd by Pidgeytrust. 6th trial down. We were making pretty good progress, but unfortunately there's a lot to get through before our next trial. Firstly, I'm able to evolve Prism into Clefable, and then I run into the most random character possible, Grimsley. Like, why Grimsley? I swear this game just throws random characters at you from the past sometimes. Wait a minute, what if it's not Grimsley? What if it's a Ditto? What if they're assuming the form of the most powerful and influential people from other regions to try and take over? Oh my god, it's happening, isn't it? Anyway, moving on from that, we've got another grand trial to get through. Now the last two haven't been extremely difficult, so let's see if this one can give me a bit more of the challenge. So first up is Sableye, and I start with Clefable. Now Clefable would be a perfect counter to this spooky ghost, but unfortunately she hasn't got any fairy type moves. This means despite being able to heal with Moonlight and raising my special attack with charge beam boosts, Prism actually loses the 1v1 with Sableye as it keeps lowering Prism's special defense with Shadow Balls. That means before I can KO I have to switch into Pidgeytrust, and then the Sableye gets fully healed with a Hyper Potion. This is going well so far. I can't leave Pidgeytrust in because she's threatened by Power Gem, so I switch into Fish, who takes the hit really well despite a crit. I then go through a Yawn to put the Sableye to sleep. Because I want to heal Prism, I switch her back in as the Sableye falls asleep. Perfect. Should be able to get off a couple of heals here, and of course, because me, right? This is actually starting to piss me off. At the very least, Prism is able to heal back to nearly full. I then switch into Squidward, hoping to finally KO this stupid thing, but annoyingly, Bubble Beams aren't doing as much as I'd like. Squidward is able to eventually get the KO on what's got to be Alola's most annoying Pokemon, but he does take a lot of damage in the process. That was a lot of work to KO one Pokemon. Let's hope the rest of this fight goes slightly smoother. Second is Korokorok, which is perfect for Squidward, who can outspeed and KO with a single Bubble Beam. Third is a Persian that looks like it's ran headfirst into a wall, so I switch into Fish on a Fake Out. Fish then has to take a scary Z move, but Fish is a beast and takes the hit well before landing a Yawn. With the kitty about to fall asleep and the Z move gone, I'm able to safely switch into Mobius and KO with a Z move of my own. Right, that Sableye can right off, but overall that wasn't too difficult. Another grand trial beat. We then got a load of stuff to do with Lily and her mother, and I'll be honest, I'd give you a recap of the story leading up to this climactic battle, but I kind of wasn't paying attention. Like, if you paid me to explain what's happening, I probably still couldn't tell you. Let's just beat Lusameme and pretend I know what's going on, shall we? So first up for Lusameme is her Clefable, and I start with Vikakid. I start the fight by putting the tanky pink Nightmare to sleep before switching into Shadow. I'm hoping to KO here before the Clefable can even wake up, but unfortunately I don't get that lucky because after one turn I spend setting up a light screen, the Clefable wakes up. Great. Shadow is able to do good damage with a Flash Cannon, but before I can get off another one, Clefable lowers Shadow's special attack with a Moonblast. I think it's best to shake off the attack drop here, so I switch switch back into Vikavolt and then put the Clefable back to sleep. I then switch back into Shadow as the Clefable naps and KO with a high roll flash cannon. That took slightly longer than I would have liked, but at least it's down. Second is Lopunny, who threatens with the elemental punches. Easy way to deal with this though is Intimidate, so I switch into Dragoon on an Ice Punch? Lopunny should have gone for Fire Punch there. Very confused. I assume the Lopunny will go for a 4 times effective Thunder Punch here, but because it was strange last turn, I decide to Protect to see what it goes for, and it goes for Fire Punch? Okay, the AI seems to have broken, which is actually terrifying, considering I can't predict what this Lopunny is going to go for, and it has so much coverage. With the Lopunny being scary, I decide to put it to sleep with Fish, and I immediately get crit on the switch. Great. Fish does only have to take one more weak Ice Punch though, before Yawn connects. I then switch back into Dragoon, which is slightly risky, but at -2 attack, even a Thunder Punch shouldn't KO here. Luckily, I never have to find out, because Lopunny just goes through a Dizzy Punch on the switch. Lopunny then falls asleep, so I decide to spend a turn setting up a Dragon Dance. I do get greedy on the next turn, because instead of getting the KO, I go through another Dragon Dance, and then the game punishes me because the bunny wakes up, lands a Dizzy Punch, and confuses. Right, now if the Lopunny goes for a Thunder Punch and it crits, I probably will lose Dragoon here. I'm willing to take that risk to remove the bunny from the field though, so I stay in and break through the confusion, thank god. With a single Aqua Tail, I'm able to KO the rabbit. Third is Lilligant, and I get lucky with confusion again because a single Ice Fang is enough for another quick KO. Fourth is Beware, and this thing scares me. It has an insane attack stat and it's fairly bulky. Let's hope we can KO it quick. I don't really want to push my luck with Dragoon any more than I already have, so I switch into Shadow on a weak Jewel Chop. I then switch back into Dragoon for the Intimidate, and even after the attack drop, Takedown does a huge amount. I hate this bear. I decide putting the Pink Bear to sleep is probably the play, so I switch through Shadow to get my Butter 3 in safely. A single Sleep Powder then puts the bear to sleep. Perfect. I then start trying to set up Quiver Dances, and the bear immediately wakes up. Okay, f you too, bear. Luckily, Thyka Kid is able to outspeed and one-shot with a critical hit Air Slash. What comes around goes around, I suppose. That just leaves Lucamine's last Pokemon, Milotic, who I immediately put to sleep. I love my Butterfly. I then go through a Bug Buzz that, despite being resisted, does a decent amount. Of course, before I can end this fight with one last attack, Milotic wakes up and lands a really scary Icy Wind. I would still be able to finish off the Milotic here, if not for the case that my speed was just lowered. With my speed lowered, I now don't know if I can outspeed with my Butterfly, so I can't take the risk. Instead, I decide to send in Pidgeytrust, who I'm sure can take one hit here and then outspeed and KO, right? Oh, well, shit. That's the first death we've had in a while. Rest in peace, Pidgeytrust. Sucks to lose my bird there, but at least Dragoon is able to come in, take a really hard Hydro Pump, and then end this fight with an Aqua Tail. With that, Lucamine has been defeated, and we're one step closer to our 7th trial. Got a couple of things to get through first though, like being carried around like a small child by what I'm hereby referring to as my daddy. The way he holds me makes me feel so safe. Oh, anyway, that got a bit weird, didn't it? Let's move quickly on. We're able to pick up another encounter, a replacement for Pidgeytrust. I've saved my fossil encounter through an Aerodactyl, and I'm glad I did, because Roxard will be really useful against the next totem. Next, I have to make my way towards the next trial, and there's a lot of super scary trainers between me and it. The good news is I'm able to make it past every single one of these trainers without losing anyone. Bad news is, right at the last trainer, Dragoon the Gyarados over levels. That's so annoying. Now I'm going to have to actually come up with a new plan instead of relying on Intimidate switching like I have for pretty much every other totem in this game. At the very least, I am able to come up with a plan, so the totem Pokemon literally jumps out of the sky, and we're ready to start this. I start with Murkrow, who I've given a wide lens and taught Will-O-Wisp. There's still a small chance I miss this, but landing a Will-O-Wisp is worth the risk. So I go for the attack, and it lands. Right, that's the totem crippled. Now I just have to KO it and its ally Noivern. So I immediately switch into Roxard, who actually still takes a decent amount from a Dragon Claw and Dragon Pulse. Well, it looks like Roxard isn't going to get out of this fight alive, but my best bet is still to go all in and try to KO the totem as fast as possible. So I go through a Flying Z move that cleanly KOs the totem. Nice. Of course, Roxard does then go down to a Dragon Pulse, but he did his job and he did it well. Rest in peace. Shadow then KOs the annoying Noivern with 3 discharges. Shame to have lost Roxard there, but that still went pretty smoothly. 7th trial down, 1 more to go. Of course, before we can get to that final trial though, we have to get past what is one of Pokemon's most infamous boss battles, Ultra Necrozma. So I grab myself a Focus Sash and head in. I'm going through a Toxic Stall strategy here, so let's hope this works. I start with Fish, who I've given the Focus Sash, so he can't be one-shot. This means I'm completely safe to take a massive amount from a stupidly powerful attack before landing a toxic. Right, now this monster is on a timer, just have to stall it out. I'll be honest though, I was expecting Snorlax, my most specially bulky Pokemon, to have taken that hit just a tiny bit better. This could be bad. After stalling for a turn with Protect, I switch into Shadow as he resists most of this monster's attacks. Even with an Eviolite and resisting though, my Magnet still takes a huge amount from another attack. Crits could very easily screw me over here, couldn't they? Fingers crossed we get lucky here then, because after protecting for another turn, I have to switch, this time into Prism. I hold my breath, and Prism survives on 12 HP. Jesus, that was close. We've done it though, because now I can stall for one more turn with Protect, and Necrozma goes down. Again, crits could have cost me half my team there, but somehow we made it through deathless. Suck it, you glowing dragon. With Necrozma down and the world saved, or something, again I'm not really paying attention, we can carry on to our last trial. Before we can get to our last totem, we do have to battle a lot of familiar faces, none of whom I remember the name of. Luckily they're all pushovers, so now we just have to take down our last totem. This time we're up against a scary bee, and what's terrifying is that I can't even intimidate switch this one. Hopefully Squidward can do some decent damage instead. So turn 1, the totem sets up a Quiver Dance, which could be bad, before I go all in on a Poison Z move that very nearly KOs. Of course, because this stupid flea sets up another Quiver Dance, Squidward just misses the KO on the following turn. Blissey then goes for a Helping Hand, meaning the flea's Bug Buzz is going to really hurt at +3 special attack, but Squidward, being reliable as always, tanks the hit and then hits back with another Sludge Wave, KOing our final totem. Blissey then goes down to a single close combat from Mobius. Pretty straightforward final totem battle. Had I gotten crit there, that could have gotten bad fast, but we did it, meaning all that's left standing between us and the Pokemon League is one final Grand Trial. Honestly, the rest of the Grand Trials in this game haven't been overly difficult, and this one proves to be pretty straightforward as well. Dragoon is able to one-shot the Golurk with an Aqua Tail, and then Flygon goes down to a single Ice Fang. Third is a horse with dreadlocks, who is slightly more of an issue. Thankfully though, after a couple of Intimidate switches, it's been neutered enough to the point that Dragoon can come in safely and KO with a few more Aqua Tails. That just leaves Gastrodon, who Fish is able to wall and KO with Body Slams. Easy, that's the final Grand Trial taken down, and that just leaves the Pokemon League. That last fight might have been easy, but this Pokemon League is no joke. Let's see who we're bringing to this final challenge then. First off, Square U the Starmie, who hits fast and hard and boasts really good coverage. Second is Magnus the Flareon, who can support the rest of my team with Will-O-Wisp while also being important as my only fire type. Third is Shadow the Magneton, the tankiest magnet this side of the Lola. Fourth is Dragoon the Gyarados, who not only hits stupidly hard but provides vital utility with Intimidate. Fifth is Fish the Snorlax, who as well as being super tanky, can support the rest of the team with Yawns. That just leaves our final member of our team, Murkrow the Gengar, who gives me another speedy attacker on what is a very defensive team. My Pokemon are all pretty strong, but we're still going to have our work cut out for us if you want to get through what is one of the hardest Elite Four and Champion fights in all of Pokemon. Remember to wish me luck by leaving a like if you haven't done so already. Let's go end this. First up for this Elite Four is Molayne the Steel-type trainer. Molayne's team is filled with some really scary Pokemon, so let's hope this goes well. Molayne starts with Klefki and I start with Magnus. Klefki starts with the priority spikes before Magnus lands a Fire Fang that does huge damage. Annoyingly, before I can get the KO, Klefki sets up a Reflect, which is going to be annoying to deal with. At the very least, the keys then go down to a second Fire Fang. Second for Molayne is Dugtrio, who threatens with powerful ground type attacks. Dragoon is the perfect switch here though, as he's able to come in on an Earthquake, which he's immune to. The Dugtrio is then able to get off a tiny bit of damage with a Sucker Punch, but then a single Aqua Tail is enough for a one-shot. Third is Magnezone, so I switch into Fish on a really hard Thunderbolt. I'm slightly worried about another one of those critting, but I get lucky because the Magnezone just goes through a Screech that misses. This allows Fish to land a Brick Break that does decent damage. Unfortunately, I don't get lucky for a second time because on the following turn, Magnezone actually does land a second powerful Thunderbolt before Fish lands a Brick Break on the Zappy Magnet that brings it to just below half. I am now risking a crit if I stay in and take another Thunderbolt, but I believe the term is never punished because Fish survives and lands a third Brick Break for the KO. Next, the Metagross gets sent out, and this thing scares me. I decide intimidating the metal monster to make it slightly less scary is probably the way to go, so I send in Dragoon on a resisted Bullet Punch. Oh yeah, forgot about Clear Body. Oops. Oh well, with Dragoon in, I might as well go for an attack here, and Dragoon Dragoon lands a critical hit Aqua Tail for massive damage. I don't have time to celebrate though, because Dragoon then has to take a Zen Headbutt that does a stupid amount. I knew Metagross was strong, but Jesus. Need someone that can take a hit here, so I switch into Shadow on another Zen Headbutt. Shadow is able to land a discharge that very nearly KOs before taking a massive amount from a Hammer Arm. I'm now expecting to outspeed and KO, but of course Molayne heals the Metagross with the full restore. Well, that's annoying, but at the very least, Shadow lands a critical hit discharge, bring the Metagross back down to 50%. My crit luck this fight is actually kind of mad. Annoyingly, another discharge just misses the KO on the following turn, so Metagross is able to get off another really scary Hammer Arm. I once again think I'm finally going to be able to KO the Metagross here, but of course, Molayne has another healing item. It's funny how quickly you forget how annoying healing items are in a game where the majority of boss fights, like totems, don't use them. Luckily though, thanks to another discharge landing after Metagross is healed, I can safely switch into Murkrow on another Hammer Arm and then KO with a single Shadow Ball. Wondering why I didn't do that earlier instead of risking all those Hammer Arms critting? I honestly wasn't sure if Murkrow would have been able to KO the Metagross so easily. All worked out though, so all we've got to now deal with is the Bisharp. Thankfully, unlike Metagross, Bisharp is pretty easy to handle. I can send in Magnus on what is a stupidly strong Night Slash and then KO with a Fire Z move. Right, first member of the Elite Four down. That was a lot harder than I thought it would be honestly, and I risked way too many crits. Hopefully the rest of these fights go somewhat smoother. Second for this Elite Four is Olivia, the Rock type trainer. Rock is generally pretty easy to deal with, so I'm hoping this fight isn't too much trouble. Olivia starts with Armaldo, and I start with Square U. Square U is able to outspeed and one-shot with a single Scald. Good start. Second is Cradle-Lily, so I switch into Fish. On the switch, Olivia sets up a Stealth Rocks, which might cause me problems if I'm not careful. Fish completely walls this strange penis-tipped plant though, so after putting it to sleep with a Yawn, he's able to take it down with a couple of Brick Breaks without any issues. Third is Lycanroc, and I'm hoping to bait out the Z move here, so I immediately protect. Annoyingly, the Rock Pup only goes for a Stone Edge though. I then switch into Shadow, and this time the Lycanroc actually does go through its Z move, because of course. Luckily, Shadow is tanky enough to completely eat the hit. Shadow walls the Lycanroc pretty hard, so after setting up a Reflect, a single Flash Cannon and Discharge are enough for another KO. Fourth then for Olivia is Probopass, so I switch into Dragoon on an Earth Power. Dragoon is taking a huge amount from Stealth Rocks, so really going to need to be careful with when I send him in. I then switch to Fish on a Thunder Wave. Probopass then sets up a Sandstorm, while Fish gets paralyzed for a turn. Right, this thing is going to be annoying to take down, isn't it? At the very least, after taking a weak Power Gem, Fish is able to land a Yawn. I want to get off some damage with Fish before I switch here, but of course, after being brought low by another Power Gem, Fish gets paralyzed again. Well, at least the nose is asleep, so I'm pretty safe to switch into Square U, and Olivia heals with a Full Heal. For fuck's sake, why did she have that? I've got my Starfish in though, and I'm pretty sure she can take at least one hit here. So I stay in and get off the Scald, which doesn't even do 50% to the nose, before the Probopass lands another Thunder Wave. Right, well, don't want to play around with paralysis again, so I switch into Dragoon, as the Probopass resets up Sandstorm. Dragoon has been brought to 50% by Stealth Rocks and Sandstorm, but that's 100% worth it because he's finally able to KO the stupid ugly nose with an Aqua Tail. That took forever. Last for Olivia is Gigalith, who would normally be a problem, but luckily I had a pretty simple answer for this Rock Titan. Dragoon using a Water Z move. Easy. Right, that fight went better than the first one, but that Probopass was really annoying. At least we won. 2 down, 2 more to go. Third for this Elite Four is Acerola, and you know how the last 2 fights have been fairly challenging? Well, Acerola completely ends that because Murkrow is able to outspeed and one-shot 4 out of 5 of their Pokemon. That just leaves Drifblimp, who can't even hurt Fish, so after stalling the Blimp out of Omnis Winds and bringing it really low, Murkrow can come in and claim his final KO of the match. Nice 3 fight in the middle of this Elite Four, not going to complain. Last of this Elite Four then is Kahili. You'll notice that every other member of this Elite Four is someone we've met on our journey so far. So, like, who the f is this and why does she like flying types and golf? Who knows? She starts with Braviary and I start with Shadow. The American bird really can't touch Shadow, so after setting up a Reflect, 3 Thunderbolts are enough to KO. Second is Hawlucha, who is actually pretty scary. Thankfully, I've got Murkrow, who can come in on a fighting type move. Okay, what the f? No idea why the AI went for Throat Chop there. At least Murkrow survived, meaning he can outspeed and KO a single Thunderbolt on the following turn. Or I'll be outsped and the Hawlucha will go through a Poison Jab. Okay, confusing. At least it's gone. Third is Mandibuzz, so I switch into Dragoon. After an Intimidate, Dragoon is able to get off good damage with an Ice Fang before being confused by a Tita Dance. Right, this is going to be one of those fights, isn't it? Luckily, Dragoon breaks through on the following turn and very nearly KOs with the second Ice Fang before being hit by a Brave Bird. I know the Mandibuzz is probably going to be healed on the following turn, so I decide to switch into Shadow. I then switch back into Dragoon, throw another Intimidate, and immediately get confused again. I hate this bird. I really don't want to play around with confusion here, so I switch into Shadow and then Dragoon again, this time finally not being confused when I send Dragoon in. Perfect. Dragoon then even freezes with an Ice Fang on the following turn. Looks like I'm going to be able to finally KO this stupid bird. I decide as Mandibuzz is frozen, I might as well set up a Dragon Dance here, and the Mandibuzz immediately unfreezes itself and confuses Dragoon again. This is getting stupid, especially because Dragoon immediately hurts himself on the following turn and takes another Brave Bird. Right, time to switch out for the 100th time, so I switch into Shadow and then Dragoon again. Maybe this time I can actually KO the world's most annoying bird. So I go through an Ice Fang before being confused, but I actually get lucky on the following turn and break through the confusion, finally KOing the Mandibuzz. That has got to be the most annoying bird in all of Pokemon. At least the rest of this fight doesn't last long, meaning I don't die of old age, as Shadow is able to KO the Toucannon with a Thunderbolt, and then Dragoon is able to make quick work of the Oricorio. Right, that fight really did feel like I was fighting Mandibuzz and friends, but we made it through. That just leaves one last obstacle between us and becoming champions then, our rival Hau. I've always hated the fact that they changed the champion from Kukui to Hau in the Ultra games. Having a Professor Champion was really unique and a pretty cool twist. Oh well, time to end this. Hau starts with Raichu and I start with Fish. Fish does have to take a really scary Focus Blast, but being the best chunky boy he is, he takes the hit and then lands a Yawn. I then switch into Murkrow as the Raichu falls asleep, and then KO with a single Shadow Ball. Second is Tauros, and I actually smell a setup opportunity here. Switching between Shadow and Dragoon, I can pretty safely get the ball to -6 attack, and then setting up a Dragon Dances. Not the most honourable way to win, but hey, if it works, why not? Ah shit. Honestly, wasn't expecting a crit there to one-shot. Dragoon, between you and Shadow, you completely walked all over this game, and it's such a shame to lose you right here at the end. Need a new plan now. Let's go win this through our overpowered Gyarados. Rest in peace, buddy. So even with Dragoon down, the Tauros is still at -6 attack, so I can safely send Swear You in and KO with a single Scald. Third for Hau is Noivern, so I switch into Fish on a Dark Pulse. After taking a second Dark Pulse, Fish then lands a Yawn. Perfect. Annoyingly, before Fish can KO with Body Slams, the Noivern does wake up, and then Hau heals with a full restore. Fish is tanky enough to deal with it though, so after putting the dragon back to sleep for a second time, Fish is eventually able to KO with Body Slams. Fourth is Flareon, and after stalling for a turn with Protect, I see that this fluffy boy is going for Charm. That means I'm completely safe to get off another Yawn, switch into Square U, and then KO with 3 Scalds. Fifth for Hau is his ugly crab, and thankfully I can KO this thing quickly with a single Psychic. I think if I had to look at that thing for a second longer, I might have been sick. Hau's down to his last Pokemon then, Primarina. This thing is pretty bulky, but a combination of the critical hit Thunderbolt from Square U and then a Body Slam from Fish are enough to take down my rival's starter and end this fight. We've done it, we've beaten Ultra Moon with only Kanto Pokemon. I hope if you made it this far you've enjoyed the video. Gen 7 takes a lot of work, even if it was pretty fun to play. Thanks again for watching, I'll see you all next time.